He stood at the window of his solar, watching as a lone raven cut across the pale morning sky. The chill of midwinter slipped in through the small casement, and though a brazier burned behind him, Eddard Stark felt the season's sharpened claws more keenly than any fire's warmth. Stillness stretched along the courtyard below, yet he knew activity coiled in every corridor of the Red Keep this day, each man or woman with a purpose, each footstep determined by something larger than themselves. Outside these walls, winter settled into the land at a steadily increasing pace. The realm was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that carried tension like an almost plucked bowstring. In that hush, Ned could feel the shape of tomorrow's burdens on his shoulders. A light knock sounded. Ned turned, careful not to startle the soot-stained raven perched behind the glass. Ser Davos Seaworth stood in the doorway, snow dusting his cloak, a polite bow half-formed. "My Lord Hand," Davos said. "His Grace is convening the council." Word from Storm's End arrived. The scars on Davos's fingers were faint in the lamplight, reminders of Stannis's old sense of justice. Yet Davos bore them without complaint, trusting in his king's stern brand of fairness. Ned nodded, stepping away from the window. "How do the men fare in the city, Ser Davos?" he asked quietly. "We've enough provisions for the remainder of this winter, I hope?" Davos hesitated. "We do for now. The shipments from White Harbor have helped a great deal. But prices rise, and tensions with the local merchants remain. Some fear that if war breaks out again, trade routes will close, and the poor feel every rumor in their bellies." Ned rubbed a palm over the back of his neck. We must keep our eyes on the matter of supply. The king has little patience for such concerns, but that doesn't make them any less vital. Tell me of Storm's End." He spoke as they walked together down the corridor. Tapestries hung on the walls, subdued scenes of Baratheon stags crossing a wooded glade. Though the stags were regal, Ned found their fabric eyes too lifeless for comfort. Davos let out a breath. "Ser Barristan's letter says the castle is secure, the garrison restored. Loras Tyrell and Lord Renly remain at a remote estate in the Reach. A few knights keep watch on them. By all accounts, Renly's injuries have healed to an extent, though he's said to be diminished in spirit. They claim he's given up all talk of the throne. Some do not believe it fully. They passed a pair of gold cloaks patrolling the hall, men who bowed hastily at the sight of the Hand and Davos." Ned gave a brief nod. Renly's willingness to end his claim might be the best chance this realm has at lasting peace. If the younger brother accepted Stannis as king, perhaps we can unite the Stormlands. If the Tyrell banners truly yield, we avoid another wave of bloodshed. A solemn hush fell as they approached the council chamber's doors. Behind them, King Stannis and a handful of others would already be seated. Ned entered to find that, indeed, Stannis was there, with Melisandre at his shoulder, her red robes arranged in quiet splendor, eyes bright with that odd confidence she possessed. Nearby stood Kevan Lannister, Master of Coin, and Peter Baelish, ever the polite enigma, along with Varys, whose placid smile barely shifted as Ned took his seat. The table was spread with maps, sealed letters, quills, and a few half-consumed cups of tea. Stannis looked up, nodded once. "Lord Hand," he said, "we've had word that the final few Reach Lords still uncertain of my rule have sent messages. Most are prepared to confirm their loyalty, on condition that we clarify taxes and ensure no further retribution." He flicked his gaze to Kevan. "And the Westerlands remain in quiet alignment so far." Kevan's expression did not waver. "House Lannister stands by the crown, yes, your grace, provided the agreed terms are kept." There was a subdued undercurrent to the remark, as though each side tested the other's boundaries. Stannis turned next to Ned. "Ser Barristan's letter includes an estimate of Storm's End's readiness. The fortress is intact, lacking only fresh supplies from the Rose Road. Barristan suggests we dispatch provisions immediately, and he mentions that Loras Tyrell left behind a small retinue who swear they will keep the peace if we keep our word regarding Mace Tyrell's safety." Ned had a sense that Stannis chafed at these diplomatic entanglements. Robert had possessed a certain flair for quick decisions, but Stannis approached them methodically, lacking his late brother's warmth. "We can arrange for shipments," Ned said. "But the roads in the Stormlands must remain secure. I hear talk of bandits, remnants of the men who once fought for Renly. If we do not keep order, supply caravans will vanish." Davos cleared his throat. "In truth, the city watch is spread thin. But I've spoken to certain knights who might volunteer for extra patrol. We can offer them partial wages from the crown if Lord Tywin releases additional funds." Kevin Lannister's eyes narrowed slightly. "We do have a limit, Ser Davos, though the crown's improved terms allow for some portion to be freed, if the right arrangement is made." Stannis's annoyance flickered. "We will not stand here, cap in hand, to the Lannisters forever. The realm's gold should not hinge on a single house's whim." A tension-laden pause followed. Ned intervened softly. "Your Grace, for now we do rely on that gold, but we are exploring new trade revenues with Bravos, Pentos, and Volantis, yes? Master Baelish has begun negotiations. That should ease matters in time." Peter offered his customary half-smile. "Indeed, my Lord Hand. Word from Bravos indicates they would consider a loan on favorable terms, given the Iron Bank's preference to see stable leadership in Westeros. They do not care if that stability is named Baratheon or otherwise. Results matter more than lineage to them." Stannis exhaled. "I have no fondness for foreign lenders, but if it helps us keep order without dancing to Tywin's tune, so be it. Let us proceed. In the meantime, I want these caravans readied for Storm's End, and some means to pacify the outlaws on the Rose Road. The longer we delay, the more chaos seeps in." Melisandre's voice emerged then, a quiet ripple in the stillness. "Chaos is ever the adversary of truth, Your Grace. Best it be extinguished before the dawn. The Lord of Light stands with the righteous." Some at the table shifted uncomfortably. Ned found himself recalling how she had first arrived, a foreign priestess with flames dancing in her eyes. She never pushed her beliefs on the council, but her presence alone stirred unease. Stannis, however, seemed to take counsel from her in private. He simply nodded now, as if dismissing her comment without refuting it. "Yes," he said, "we end the chaos. Now, regarding the North, Lord Stark, you have pressed me for more support to the Night's Watch. The Lords remain reluctant to feed and arm a force they see as archaic. But I have drafted a decree that each major region supply 100 men, volunteers or criminals. If they cannot muster that many, they may send gold instead. I will see it enforced." Ned leaned forward, gratitude mixing with the tension of endless tasks. "Thank you, Your Grace. The Watch grows anxious. Reports of oddities beyond the wall keep coming. They lack men to investigate. This decree may be the difference between vigilance and calamity." Varys added in a gentle tone, "Even if these so-called undead are but wild tales, more men on the wall can only help keep the wildlings in check. A realm at peace is a realm that can look outward, yes." A subdued consensus formed around the table. The small council concluded after an hour of discussion, culminating in Stannis instructing Kevin to release a certain portion of crown funds for essential roads, with the promise of future concessions. Tywin Lannister's influence loomed in the background like a silent fortress on a hill, and though Kevin was more tactful than his brother, Ned sensed the Lannisters would not remain content unless they gained further commitments. He tried not to dwell on it now, one crisis at a time. When the meeting ended, the courtiers dispersed. Ned joined Davos, stepping out into a hallway where torches flickered along the walls. A tapestry of Aegon the Conqueror's landing, from the Targaryen era, hung in tatters, partially burned from some old fire. It reminded Ned of how cyclical these struggles were. One dynasty supplants another, each new king forging alliances with the old houses. So much blood, so little lasting peace. He wondered if his efforts would truly hold the realm together, or if another whirlwind might come when Stannis was gone. Davos gave him a sidelong look. "You seem troubled, my Lord Hand." Ned forced a tight smile. "Every day here troubles me, Ser Davos. I do what I must. The question is whether it will suffice." Davos's expression turned thoughtful. "The king respects you. Even if he is not one for courtesies, he values your honesty. They paused at a window that overlooked a courtyard dusted with the morning's snow. Guards patrolled the outer walls, gazes flicking warily. Ned recalled the days after Robert's rebellion, how the city had soared with exultation over a new era. Now the mood was cautious. Perhaps that was better than naive celebration. He nodded to Davos. We can only press forward. I must see to fresh letters for the night's watch. Good day, Ser Davos. He made his way toward his solar, the halls eerily quiet at this hour. The hush suited him, allowing his mind to roam. A pair of stewards hurried by, discussing something about the queen. Ned paused, recollecting that Stannis already had a wife, Lady Celis, stationed at Dragonstone with her fervent devotion to Lawler. At times, Ned wondered why she had not come to King's Landing to stand beside her husband. Perhaps she too found these southern intrigues distasteful. Or perhaps Melisandre advised that Celis remain away. The uncertain dynamic gave rise to rumors, some unsavory, but Ned tried not to traffic in rumors. In his solar, he found a sheaf of letters from the north waiting for him, dispatches from his castellan at Winterfell, from Lord Wyman Manderley at White Harbor, from the Master of Castle Black. He settled in to read them by the pale light streaming through the narrow window. The words told stories of fresh snow drifts, minor skirmishes among the mountain clans, and a shortage of skilled blacksmiths for the watch's outposts. Manderley wrote with pride that White Harbor's new ship designs might soon ply the seas with goods for King's Landing, if only the storms abated. Ned allowed himself a small, weary satisfaction. These were exactly the steps that might knit the realm together again. Yet one letter in particular caught his eye. It came from Benjen Stark, written in a hurried scrawl. Rangers patrolling deep in the haunted forest had found unnatural footprints in the snow, trailing off into the far north. They had lost the trail among rocky outcrops, but the ranger leading them insisted the footprints did not belong to wildlings. He claimed something about them glowed faintly at night, though Ned suspected the man had simply been spooked. Still, the fear bled through the words. Benjen concluded by urging Ned to push Stannis harder for more men and supplies, lest a threat older than any house name them all fools for ignoring it. Ned closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. He remembered the old stories, half forgotten in the warmth of King's Landing. If the others truly stirred, they would not care about the lines of succession or the petty differences between Lannisters and Tyrells. He set the letter aside, steeling himself to raise the matter again with Stannis. The king had made progress, but perhaps not enough. The realm was too large, too scattered, and men's hearts were always drawn to the urgent conflicts rather than the distant specter of legends. Resolute, Ned began drafting a missive to the king, urging a larger expedition north once resources allowed. Maybe come spring or the next chance. Yet spring might be far off, the way the snows seemed to gather. He completed the letter by midday and sealed it. Before he could dispatch it, however, another knock sounded. A steward announcing that a group of men from the Westerlands had arrived with a request for a hearing. Ned realized with a wry twist of his mouth that his duties as hand never ceased. He rose, donned his cloak, and followed the steward back through the labyrinth of corridors to a modest reception chamber. There, 5 men waited, all wearing variations of scarlet and gold. One was tall, gaunt, and wore a grim expression. He introduced himself as Ser Lucan Banefort, a knight sworn to House Lannister. Ser Lucan bowed low. "My Lord Hand, we come representing Lord Tywin's interests. We oversee certain gold mines near the border of the Crownlands, and we seek permission to expand trade routes for shipping or to Lannisport and beyond. We were told you might grant the necessary writs." Ned resisted the urge to grimace. Here it was again, the Lannisters pressing for more commercial privileges. "Lord Tywin and I discussed these matters," he said evenly. "The Crown agreed to examine expansions, so long as they do not conflict with the capital's own supply lines, or shortchange other houses that rely on Crownlands roads. Have you the documents?" One of the men stepped forward, presenting a neat roll of parchment. Ned read it, scanning quickly. The language was couched in politeness, but essentially demanded near-exclusive use of certain major roads. That would hamper trade from other directions, including some from the Stormlands. He shook his head. This is too expansive. I cannot sign it in its current state. We must ensure equal access, or we risk alienating newly loyal lords. Revisions are needed. The men exchanged glances. Ser Lucan cleared his throat. We were told that King Stannis might look favorably on House Lannister's requests. After all, we helped secure the throne at a crucial hour. Ned met his gaze coolly. That fact is not in dispute. But we will not forsake the realm's balance for the convenience of a single house, however powerful. I will propose an amendment. If you accept, the trade expansions can proceed in a more limited scope. If you refuse, I fear the matter must wait until the next full council session. And King Stannis grows impatient with such negotiations. An uneasy silence. Finally, Ser Lucan inclined his head. Very well, my Lord Hand. Let us see your amendments. Ned carefully reworded the parchment, reducing the scope so that other houses also had road access. The men conferred, then grudgingly accepted. He signed, affixed the hand's seal, and told them that final confirmation awaited the king's approval. Ser Lucan left, the men trailing him, perhaps to pen a letter to Tywin. With any luck, that would forestall a broader argument. Weary from the incessant demands, Ned turned toward the yard, thinking a breath of fresh air might restore him. As he stepped outside, a swirl of snow brushed past his boots. The sun sat low in the sky, still bright enough to glint on the red keep stones. Around him, knights sparred in the cold, their steel ringing. Children darted about, throwing half-hearted snowballs at each other, heedless of the biting wind. It reminded Ned of Winterfell for just an instant, how his own sons used to run through the yard. Robb was grown now, left behind in the north to learn the ways of a young lord. Bran was older, too, no doubt climbing the walls with the same heedless passion he'd shown at home. Time had swept forward while Ned was embroiled in politics here. He felt a pang, longing for the day he could ride north in truth. Lord Stark, came a voice at his elbow. He turned to find Peter Baelish standing there, hands folded beneath a fur-lined cloak. Littlefinger had a way of appearing when least expected, always wearing that faintly amused expression. A cold day for a stroll in the yard, wouldn't you say? Ned gave a curt nod. You know as well as I that King's Landing rarely sees heavy snows. We take the cold as it comes. Peter's mouth twitched in something like agreement. Indeed, I was curious about your stance on certain upcoming proposals. The Bravosi might be open to an infusion of credit for the crown, but they want an assurance that no conflict with the Westerlands will hamper repayment. It would effectively limit any crown military action near Lannisport or the Gold Roads. Ned's brow furrowed. They want to tie our hands if we ever come to odds with House Lannister? A shrug. In polite language, yes. They fear lending money if a civil conflict might arise. They want the realm stable so their gold is not lost in war. I can't blame them from a banker's perspective, but from the perspective of the crown. Ned drew a measured breath. We cannot guarantee we'll never have friction with the Lannisters. They're important, yes, but also volatile. Tywin will not appreciate a foreign bank curtailing the crown's freedom. Peter's eyes glimmered. Yet we need coin. The question is whether it's wise to accept that yoke. We have other lenders, though fewer with Braavos' deep pockets. The Iron Bank is the largest fish in the sea. Others come with similar strings or less favorable interest. A conundrum, indeed. Ned studied the man. I'll not sign away the realm's sovereignty for a bag of gold. We might negotiate narrower language, ensuring only that the crown does not start an unprovoked war on Lannisport. That's hardly in our interest anyway. Peter inclined his head. A cunning approach. I'll draft an alternate proposal. Perhaps they'll accept. Sometimes, fear of risk leads lenders to demand more than they truly require. And we can always push back. Ned gave a small, humorless smile. Do so, and ensure we keep the king informed from the start. He dislikes feeling manipulated. Even if this is the best route, he must see the logic for himself. Peter bowed. Of course, Lord Hand. I shall have the draft within a day. He turned to depart, leaving Ned amid the swirling snow. In the yard, A pair of stable hands chatted about the rumored approach of more Tyrell delegates. Word traveled fast in the Red Keep, and Ned suspected they would come seeking a better arrangement for their harvest shipments. Already, the Tyrells had partial trade deals with the Crown. Another sign that the realm, though battered, was trying to stitch itself back together. Perhaps it would hold. Perhaps. He returned inside, the warmth of the corridors jolting him after the crisp yard air. As he proceeded toward the royal apartments, he saw Stannis in conversation with a tall, heavy-set man who wore a circlet of red gold. On spotting Ned, the man inclined his head politely. Ned recognized him. Lord Celtigar of Claw Isle, an ally of Stannis. They were discussing the redesign of certain watchtowers along the Blackwater Bay. The king beckoned Ned over, presumably wanting his input as hand. Ned obliged, half his mind still swirling with the news from the north. Lord Celtigar explained that a ring of watchtowers might be placed at intervals along the shoreline, each with a beacon for warning of pirates or any approaching threat. Stannis listened with obvious interest, for the seas around Dragonstone had always been among his prime concerns. Ned supported the idea in principle, though he noted the cost. Did they have the budget for new towers? Stannis admitted it would be a stretch, but insisted the realm's safety was paramount. Another matter to add to the ledger, perhaps negotia. Once Lord Celtigar left, Stannis turned to Ned. "Lord Hand, walk with me a moment," he said. There was a heaviness to his tone that made Ned's pulse quicken. They moved along the corridor, guards at a respectful distance. The flicker of torchlight cast wavering shadows on the stone. Stannis paused at a narrow window slit. Snow coated the ledge outside, faintly shimmering. "Your letter about the wall came. You ask for an expedition north come spring. Scouts, supplies, men. You still fear these old stories are more than rumor?" Ned chose his words carefully. "I do, Your Grace. Even if they prove false, a thorough assessment of the wall's condition and the lands beyond would do us good. The watch is too few in number to manage on its own." Stannis grunted. "I have half a mind to go myself, as Robert once threatened. But my presence here is still needed. The realm is not fully subdued. Renly might not stir, but who knows what others might try." Ned suppressed a sigh. "If you lead an expedition, it would show your commitment. Yet I understand your concerns. Perhaps we can appoint a royal commander for that purpose. A man of unimpeachable loyalty." Stannis's gaze flicked over him. "You might fit that role, Lord Hand, but you are needed in King's Landing as well. Who else do we trust enough to handle such a mission? Barristan is at Storm's End, reorganizing. Davos handles the fleet. The Lannisters. I'd not trust them to watch our doorstep, let alone the far north. The Tyrells? Ha!" They exchanged a brief, knowing look. Yes, the list of men Stannis would trust was short indeed. Ned ventured, "We could consider the northern lords. The Umbers, the Mormonts, the Glovers. They're near the wall and know the terrain. One might lead a scouting force under official sanction." Stannis nodded slowly. "That might do. The north is yours, after all. If you name a suitable commander, I'll grant him a writ to muster men for that expedition. But not until the realm's finances are steadier. We can't spare too many soldiers with banditry still an issue in the Stormlands." Ned lowered his head in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Your Grace. I will consult with my bannermen in the north. We should not wait too long, but I'll ensure we're prudent." Stannis turned away, staring at the swirling snow beyond the window. For a moment, Ned caught the faint lines of exhaustion in the king's face. He seldom saw Stannis betray any vulnerability, but these burdens wore on every man eventually. Then Stannis straightened, that stern mask snapping back into place. "Very well," he said. "We press forward. See to it." The next day, Ned wrote a series of letters to Winterfell, House Umber, House Glover, and the Lady of Bear Island, explaining the possible expedition and soliciting suggestions for leadership. He stressed the gravity of the rumors. He also informed them of the new decree requiring each region to send men or gold to the Night's Watch. At the same time, he urged them to remain vigilant for any sign of Ironborn raids. since Balon Greyjoy's intentions were never wholly predictable. The Iron Islands had been quiet since their failed rebellion, but quiet was not always a promise of peace. Days ticked by. Letters left the city by raven or rider. The swirl of political dealings continued, though with a calmer undercurrent now that Renly's threat had subsided. People in King's Landing began to adapt to the new normal. King Stannis' somber rule, the watchful presence of gold cloaks who seldom joked, and the unspoken knowledge that House Lannister's gold underpinned much of the realm's finances. Over time, some in the streets murmured that they missed King Robert's warmth, or even that they had once liked the idea of Renly's easy charm. But with winter's cold pressing in, empty bellies cared more for bread than for the sparkle of a monarch's smile, and so they endured. One late afternoon, a small retinue bearing the sigil of House Redwine arrived from the arbor. Lady Laura Redwine, cousin to the main branch, sought an audience with the king. Ned stood by as she explained that the arbor remained loyal, but they had concerns about shipping tariffs. She asked for reduced duties in exchange for guaranteeing a steady flow of wine and grain. It was yet another negotiation for Ned to navigate. He found himself envying the simpler days in Winterfell again. Though his duties there had never been truly simple, they had not been so relentlessly tangled with every house's ambition. When the negotiations ended in a compromise that allowed the arbor partial tariff relief, Lady Laura expressed gratitude. As she left, Ned reflected on how these incremental deals might be the building blocks of a kingdom that functioned without constant war. The Tyrells, the Lannisters, the Stormlords, none of them would love Stannis, but perhaps they could be coaxed into cooperating. Still, there were shadows at the edges. Scouts reported that Randall Tarley, once steadfast behind Renly, remained sullen. He obeyed the crown's commands outwardly but had refused to attend any gatherings. Another letter from the Iron Islands indicated that Balon Greyjoy might soon proclaim his son, Theon, a prince of the Iron Islands. Ned recalled that Theon had once been a ward at Winterfell. Now, that tie might complicate matters. He tried to put it aside, for the moment. A fortnight later, fresh tidings arrived from across the narrow sea. A merchant vessel out of Pentos carried the claim that Daenerys Targaryen, though rumored to have lost her child, yet lived among the Dothraki, forging a slow alliance with scattered Khalasars. Some said she had 3 dragon eggs that might be close to hatching. Others dismissed that as nonsense, for dragons had not been seen in Westeros for a century and a half. Still, the rumor circulated. Stannis dismissed it as another fable, though Melisandre merely smiled that cryptic smile of hers, as though she believed in such portents. The months dragged on, each day bringing its small victories and recurring tensions. The city's gates sometimes had crowds of refugees from outlying farmlands, seeking shelter from the storms. Ned supervised the distribution of limited food supplies, ensuring that at least a measure of bread reached those in need. Stannis, for his part, seldom appeared in public except for official ceremonies or decrees. His style of kingship was distant, but some began to begrudgingly respect it. He was not lavish or wasteful. He was not a man of charm, but he also did not indulge in endless feasts. Taxes were assessed, but they were used for the city's defenses. Over time, a portion of the small folk took note that while their king might be joyless, he also was not draining the treasury for personal pleasures. Then came a chill morning when 2 riders from the north arrived with urgent news. They were half frozen, but they insisted on being heard immediately. Ned met them in a small antechamber, offering mulled wine while they thawed. The older man, wearing the colors of House Glover, handed Ned a letter. "Straight from Master Luwin at Winterfell, my lord," he said, breath steaming. "We rode as fast as we could." Ned took the parchment, recognized Master Luwin's neat script. As he read, an icy wave coursed through his veins. Luwin wrote that rumors of the restless dead had multiplied. A party of men at the wall had come south to one of the northern villages, speaking of corpses that walked in the night. No one could verify the tale for certain, but the fear among the villagers was real. Meanwhile, bandits had capitalized on the confusion, raiding outlying farmsteads. Some suspected that these walking corpses might be a hoax by the criminals to sow panic, but others pointed to older tales. The letter closed with a plea for more definitive crown support. Ned lowered it slowly, glancing at the messenger. "Thank you for bringing this. Have you heard any other details?" The man shook his head. "Only that folks near the Long Lake swear they heard strange howls at night. Wolves, maybe, or something else. My lord, the people are scared." Ned set his jaw. "Rest here. I'll speak to the king." That same day, he arranged an urgent council with Stannis. The lords present included Davos, Kevin, Peter, Varys, and a few others. Ned laid out the gist of Luwin's letter, acknowledging that it might be rumor but that the North was clearly on edge. "We must accelerate support for the Night's Watch," Ned concluded. "At least send a party north soon to investigate. Spring is not yet come, but some men could brave the roads." Stannis studied him, expression taut. "I've not forgotten Lord Stark, but our coffers remain limited, and the roads from King's Landing to the Neck are not entirely safe. If we send an armed group, we must ensure they can fight bandits along the way." Kevin Lannister interjected. "We can release more gold if the king desires, but we require some collateral or at least a firm structure ensuring repayment." Lord Tywin is not unfeeling, but the numbers must add up. A flicker of frustration crossed Ned's face. Everything we do, it all comes down to debts and coin." Peter Baelish spread his hands. "Such is the realm we live in, my lord. War and finance are bedfellows. Even so, we might combine efforts. The men we send could begin building alliances in the Riverlands, ensuring safer passage and collecting small taxes to fund their journey. I know it sounds crude, but a pragmatic approach might suffice." After a tense debate, Stannis agreed to dispatch a royal envoy of 70 men, headed by a loyal knight, to see the situation. He wanted Ser Roland Storm for the job, but Ser Roland was still occupied in the Stormlands, so they settled on Lord Celtigar's nephew, a man known for reliability in negotiations. Ned insisted they also include a few northern guides. Stannis gave approval. The next question was gold. Kevin agreed to facilitate some funds, though he hinted that Tywin might soon demand fresh concessions. With that hammered out, they adjourned. Ned wondered if 70 men would be enough. This was not a typical scouting party. If the rumors were true, steel might not suffice. But there was no other recourse. Stannis was not about to send half his standing forces north on the word of frightened villagers. The best Ned could do was ensure that a chain of ravens connected them, so if they discovered genuine danger, they could call for reinforcements swiftly. In the midst of these northern woes, Ned received a surprising letter from Renly Baratheon. The younger brother wrote from a small castle in the Reach, describing how he had accepted the new order, abandoned any claim to the throne, and wished for no further conflict with my dear brother. The letter was couched in oddly flowery language, hinting that Loras Tyrell's presence might have influenced it. Yet the letter also carried a subtext of sadness. Renly spoke of the shattered dreams and the cost of war. He seemed more subdued than the brash man Ned once remembered. Ned shared the letter with Stannis, who read it with a clenched jaw. After a moment, Stannis set it aside. "If he truly wishes no conflict, let him remain in the Reach. I have no desire to see him in King's Landing. He can brood on his mistakes there." Ned accepted that, silently relieved that at least open war with Renly was unlikely. The Tyrells, it seemed, had pinned their hopes on another day or another scheme, content for the moment to recoup losses. They continued sending small delegations to maintain trade agreements, but Mace Tyrell himself stayed in Highgarden, presumably licking his wounds. More time passed. The snows deepened, blanketing King's Landing in a rare hush. Children tried to build snow figures in the courtyards, and the gold cloaks trudged about in thicker cloaks of their own. People complained of stiff joints and the high cost of firewood. The Night's Watch envoys, one after another, passed in or out, conferring with Ned in hopes of more recruits. Ned did what he could, aware that winter might last who knew how long. Then, on a dark evening lit only by torches in the yard, the City Watch trumpeted the arrival of a Lannister column. They had not announced themselves until just outside the gate. Ned, suspicious, joined the watchmen at the portcullis. He recognized the banners. A golden lion on crimson. Their escort parted to reveal Jaime Lannister astride a magnificent warhorse, white cloak pinned at his shoulders, though he no longer served as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. By Stannis' decree, that position remained with Barristan Selmy. Jaime wore the white cloak but had never fully relinquished his Lannister identity, of course. Ned advanced, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Sir Jaime," he said curtly. "This is a late arrival." Jaime dismounted in one fluid movement, tossing the reins to a squire. "Lord Stark, apologies for the intrusion. I come at my Lord Father's bidding. He thought it wise that I see how well the city fares in these winter days, and how King Stannis' rule evolves." Ned's hackles rose, but he forced calm. "The city is stable enough. If you mean to speak with the king, he is in the Red Keep. You know the way." A sardonic tilt of Jaime's lips. "Indeed, perhaps you'd be so good as to announce me? I'd not wish to surprise his grace too thoroughly." He turned, beckoning to a handful of knights behind him. "We'll keep a minimal retinue inside the walls, if that pleases you, Lord Hand." Despite the polite words, an undercurrent of challenge coursed beneath them. Ned signaled to the watch to allow Jaime's group entry, though not before they carefully inspected the men for contraband. This was no open battlefield, and he had no desire to spark a confrontation at the gate. Tension crackled. Jaime's eyes flicked with faint amusement, as if enjoying the discomfort. Once the formalities were done, Ned led them up the slope toward the main keep. Snow drifted in flurries, swirling around torchlight. Servants gawked at the Lannister arrival, remembering that Tywin's forces had once sealed the city's fate in battle. Now they strode in as allies, however tenuous. Stannis received Jaime in the throne room, though it was a sparse affair. Only a handful of lords were present, and the hall's torches lent everything a stark, dancing glow. Jaime bowed shallowly. "Your Grace," he said in that self-assured tone. "I bring greetings from Lord Tywin, who wonders how well the capital holds, especially after these rumors of rising banditry on the Rose Road." Stannis' expression might have been carved from stone. "House Tyrell has subdued the bandits in that region," he replied. "The city stands. Why has Lord Tywin sent you, rather than come himself?" Jaime's cloak stirred in the cold draft. "He is occupied in the Westerlands, ensuring that none of the local lords stray from loyalty to the crown. He thought my presence might help remind the court that the Lannisters remain vigilant." Stannis' mouth tightened. "We have not forgotten." Silence stretched in the hall, each side measuring the other's posture. Then the king gestured to Ned. "Lord Hand, see that Sir Jaime is given suitable chambers. Tomorrow we will speak further. For now, let him rest from the road." Jaime, smirking, placed a hand on his hip. "Thank you, Your Grace. I look forward to our discussions, though I trust they won't be too dull. One hears so little amusement in the city these days." No one laughed. The watchers parted, letting Jaime exit under Ned's escort. As they walked, Jaime spoke in a low tone. "I hear you've staved off half a dozen crises, Stark. Quite the caretaker, aren't you? I wonder if you ever tire of cleaning up after Stannis' stern approach." Ned shot him a flinty glance. "I serve the realm. I would hardly expect you to grasp that sense of duty." Jaime's lips curled. "Ah yes, I forgot you hold me in such high esteem. The Kingslayer. Keep your moral judgments, then. I am what I am." Ned said nothing more, leading him to a suite near the southern wing. The Lannister knights followed, quietly assessing the surroundings. Once Jaime was settled, Ned departed, trying to ignore the uneasy sense that new complications had arrived with the Lion's party. By dawn, speculation buzzed in the castle. Some whispered that Jaime had come to claim a seat on the small council or to push for a betrothal. Others guessed that Tywin was simply reminding Stannis who had financed the crown's survival. For his part, Ned suspected both rumors had grains of truth. That day, in the smaller council chamber, King Stannis met Jaime, flanked by Kevan Lannister and a few others. Ned was present along with Davos, Jaime wasted no time. "Your Grace, my father wonders if you have further need of Lannister coin or steel. The realm seems calm for now, but we know winter brings unexpected troubles. House Lannister stands ready, if we are recognized accordingly." Stannis's tone was clipped. "We appreciate House Lannister's readiness. My realm has many needs, but I will not be bound by endless debts. We have new trade negotiations with Bravos that might free us from partial reliance on the Westerlands." Jaime raised an eyebrow. "Indeed, the Bravosi can be quite demanding. I wonder if it would serve the realm better to maintain more direct deals with the Rock. Fewer foreign entanglements." Kevin cleared his throat, eyeing Ned. "We Lannisters have no wish to overshadow your reign, Your Grace, merely to ensure our mutual interests remain secure. Gold flows best when the crown is stable. If there are new tasks, fortifications, roads, anything else, we can help finance them under fair conditions." Stannis flicked a gaze at Ned, as if to say, "You see what I must endure?" Aloud, he said, "We shall consider your offer if the terms do not hamper the crown's authority. Let us speak plainly. Does Lord Tywin want the kingship for himself? If not, I trust you'll accept that certain matters remain the crown's sole purview." Jaime's smile was thin. "My father's ambitions never included sitting on that throne of melted swords. He wants a stable monarchy. We can find a path that benefits both. After all, it was our swords that saved King's Landing from Renly's attempt." Stannis exhaled, holding onto his temper. "Yes, your father sees to remind me of that. Very well. We will speak further in private about these expansions you propose. Lord Hand will attend. Now, if there's nothing else." Jaime made a show of bowing. "Nothing else, Your Grace. I'm sure our next meeting will be enlightening." Once the Lannisters withdrew, Stannis's tension was palpable. Ned could nearly see the force of his frustration. "They come like tax collectors, all talk of coin and advantage. Let Tywin ask me for direct titles if that's his plan, rather than these layered insinuations." Kevin Lannister, lingering, must have heard. He cleared his throat. "I assure you, Your Grace, we only aim to help, and to see our loans repaid. Perhaps tomorrow we can finalize something." Stannis nodded curtly. Kevin took the hint and left. In the chamber, only Ned, Davos, and the king remained, along with a silent Melisandre standing by the hearth. She seemed to watch everything with an otherworldly calm. Stannis folded his arms. "Lord Hand, you see how they press. I can't refuse all Lannister demands. We must choose carefully which to grant. They want a seat on the small council for Jaime, or so I glean. That might be their next attempt." Ned frowned. "Jaime is still a Kingsguard, in name at least. Putting him on the small council gives him a voice in our affairs, effectively letting Tywin shape policies from within. I'd advise caution." Stannis's face darkened. "Let them. We'll find new ways. I won't hand the realm to Lannisters. We can compromise on roads, finances, small trade expansions, but not the seat of direct power. Enough is enough." Melisandre spoke, voice low and resonant. "The flames have shown me a lion roaring outside these walls, but the stag stands firm, strengthened by truth. If you remain true to your path, you shall not be overthrown." Ned kept his expression neutral, uncertain if her cryptic pronouncements carried any real meaning. Still, Stannis seemed to take some heart from it, so they prepared for another round of negotiations with the Lannisters. Ned drafted a plan. The crown would repay a portion of its debt earlier than planned, with funds from the Bravosi if that deal closed. In return, House Lannister would cease pressing for new privileges for at least a year. Jaime would remain in the Kingsguard, but not join the small council. Kevin might gain a minor concession, perhaps something that recognized his support. That was the concept. Whether the Lannisters agreed remained to be seen. That evening, Jaime approached Ned in a corridor, flanked by only one knight. "Lord Stark," he said smoothly, "I understand you plan to block me from a council seat. How typical. Your sense of honor or your sense of fear?" Ned met his gaze, unflinching. "I do what's best for the realm. The small council is for those the king trusts. Forgive me if I doubt your loyalty to any king beyond your father's gold." Jaime's eyes flashed. "You call me disloyal, but recall that I saved this city from the Mad King's final cruelty. Had I not slain Ares, your precious population might have burned alive, and Robert might never have sat the throne you once served." Ned stiffened. "It was not your place to decide. You were sworn to protect him, not murder him. You had other options." He knew it was not so simple, but the shame of it had stained the Kingsguard's honor in many eyes. Jaime's mouth twisted. "You and your damned illusions of honor. Perhaps I had fewer options than you'd imagine. But do not worry, I have no lust for the small council. If my father insists, I'll let him push. I find court politics tedious. Swords are more honest." Ned said nothing more. Jaime turned and strode away, cloak swirling. In the pit of his stomach, Ned felt the old bitterness. So much had changed since those days, yet the rancor between them endured. Another thread of tension woven into the tapestry of the realm. True to form, Tywin's envoys soon demanded more direct roles in government. Over the next week, closed-door sessions wore on Stannis' patience. But eventually, the two sides reached a partial settlement. The crown would repay a significant chunk of debt using the prospective Braavosi loan, and House Lannister would back off from pushing Jaime into the council. In exchange, Kevin gained influence over the distribution of certain road tolls, guaranteeing the Westerlands a healthy portion of profits from trade heading west. It was a compromise, precarious but functional. When the agreements were signed, Jaime gave Ned a mocking bow. So, the kingdom remains stuck with the quiet wolf in charge of day-to-day affairs. "I almost pity you, Stark. Or perhaps I envy you. At least your conscience is clean." Ned simply turned away. A life spent trying to preserve honor was lonely, yes, but he would not yield that path. As winter's grip tightened further, the environment around King's Landing grew bleaker. Starving peasants from the outlying farms trickled in, seeking meager relief. The City Watch did what they could, distributing some bread, but hunger loomed. Ned worried that if the snows did not relent, more might die in the streets. He conferred with Davos about shipping extra fish from the Vale, but the mountainous passes were difficult in winter, and the Vale itself was inward-looking under Lysa Arryn's rule. In the midst of these troubles, a new letter arrived from Storm's End. Ser Barristan wrote that the fortress was stable, though the Stormlands faced similar hunger issues. The silver lining was that there were fewer bandit attacks than before, perhaps because some had frozen or gone to ground. Barristan urged the crown to prepare for a harsh season overall. Ned penned a reply commending his diligence and reminding him to stay vigilant. Occasionally, Ned took a moment to watch his daughters. Arya roamed the castle with her lively spirit, occasionally practicing sword forms she had half-learned. Sansa attended small gatherings among the young ladies of the court, though the subdued atmosphere left her more often reading or sewing quietly. Ned felt regret that he could not give them the normalcy of Winterfell. Yet at least they were safe here, or safer than traveling the winter roads. One day, King Stannis summoned Ned to the old library tower, an unusual location for a meeting. When Ned arrived, he found the king standing among dust-laden tomes, a single brazier flickering in the corner. A massive table was spread with genealogical records, lines tracing the Targaryens, Baratheons, and others. Melisandre lingered near the shelves, reading an ancient volume. Stannis turned a page, expression severe. "My Lord Hand," he said quietly, "we have rummaged through these records for any clue about the old prophecies. Melisandre claims some speak of Azor Ahai reborn, a hero to drive back the darkness. She believes it might be me, though I find that talk grandiose. Still, some of these accounts mention a foe from the far north, beings of ice and death." Ned's chest tightened. Indeed, the legends of the Long Night said that Azor Ahai or the last hero battled the White Walkers. But these are old tales. We cannot rely on them solely. Melisandre's red gaze flicked up. "We do not rely, we prepare. Your watchers in the north speak of unrest. Should the great Other's creatures stir again, only the chosen warrior of Lawler can stand against them fully. The realm must be united behind him." Stannis exhaled. You hear her, Stark? She counsels me that I must embrace the Lord of Light wholly, so that the people might rally when the darkness comes. But if I do that openly, half the realm might rebel again, as they cling to the Seven. Already, some Septons grumble about my piety. Ned chose his words carefully. Your Grace, if you believe these portents, that is your choice. But forcing a new religion on the realm could tear it apart. Better to strengthen alliances quietly and focus on practical measures, patrolling the wall, arming the watch. If something truly monstrous emerges, men will band together out of survival, not doctrinal obligation. Melisandre's lips curved slightly. You rely on fear, my Lord Hand, whereas the Lord of Light offers hope. Ned kept his composure. With respect, my lady, I rely on caution and unity. If men fear they will be forced to worship a foreign god, they might resist the king's commands in smaller ways. That is not the unity we need. Stannis closed the tome with a decisive slap, dust motes floating upward. Well spoken, Ned. Perhaps it is best we remain subtle for now. If the day comes that we must stand against these others, we will. Let us hope we have time to prepare. Ned thought of the watchers at the wall, of Benjen's ominous letters. He prayed they had enough time. Another worry flickered. The Targaryens, the possibility of Dothraki crossing the sea. But even that paled before the ancient menace the legends described. War with Renly or the Lannisters was human squabbling. If the others returned, no man's gold or banners would matter. He swallowed. Yes, your Grace. Time and vigilance. I will see to it. They parted ways, leaving the dust-laden library to its silent gloom. Outside, the wind carried the faint howling of the winter gale, a lonely sound that made Ned shiver. The realm, he sensed, stood upon a cusp. One foot in the old petty conflicts, the other foot edging toward something far larger and darker than men's ambitions. And it fell upon him, as protector once and now Hand, to hold that line as long as possible. Over the following weeks, the new year crept closer, with rumors that Stannis might hold a modest festival. Nothing lavish. He had no taste for opulence, but enough to assure the people that the monarchy recognized their hardships. Ned helped plan a portion of it, ensuring some bread distribution in the streets, a brief tournament for the knights who remained near the city, and a ceremony in the Great September to pray for the realm's safety. Stannis, though not devout to the Seven, permitted it for tradition's sake. Then, on the festival's eve, a raven arrived with dire news from the expedition headed north. Lord Celtigar's nephew and his men had been ambushed in the Riverlands by bandits or outlaws loyal to who knows what cause. Casualties were heavy, forcing the rest to retreat or scatter. The letter, penned by one of the survivors, blamed the continuing chaos left over from the war against Renly. Some lords had not fully disbanded their sellswords. Others used the vacuum for personal gain. As a result, the path to the north was less safe than presumed, so the mission to the wall had stalled. They might attempt another route, but with limited men it was perilous. Stannis read the letter with a tightening scowl. Always something, he muttered. We end the main war, and still the land bristles with these renegades. Very well, we must root them out. I'll send a larger escort or place a bounty on these raiders. We cannot abide them blocking crucial roads. Ned rubbed his temples. I fear that without strong local lords to keep order, these outlaws thrive. The Tullis in Riverrun once kept a firm hand, but since Lord Hoster Tully's passing, Edmure Tully is unproven. Stannis nodded. Then we shall speak with the Tullis. They must secure the Riverlands, or we will dispatch our men. I want that northern expedition resumed. If Edmure lacks competence, we'll impose a crown-appointed warden for the region. Enough indecision. The king's frustration was understandable. Time pressed onward, winter deepened, and the realm's cracks still leaked disorder. Even so, Ned knew that forcibly overriding local rule might provoke new rebellions. The scars of the rebellion, the Greyjoy War, and the recent conflict with Renly had not fully healed. But they had no perfect solution, only a choice. Let the Riverlands fester or step in. So, as the new year dawned, Stannis sent a stern message to Edmure Tully. quell the outlaws, or the crown would intervene. Meanwhile, the battered expedition regrouped in a small keep near Harrenhal, nursing wounds. Another group of loyal soldiers would join them from King's Landing. Then, hopefully, they would press north once more. Ned prayed it would succeed. Within the city, the modest festival took place under gray skies. A few knights jousted for minor purses, and Stannis presided with an austere air. The crowds were not large, winter made traveling difficult, but some villagers and small folk appeared, partly for the free bread that was distributed in the square. Ned stood by the dais, recalling how different it had been in Robert's time, when feasts overflowed with wine and laughter. The mood now was quieter, more somber, yet some measure of hope flickered in the small folks' eyes, as if they recognized that at least the realm was not once again ablaze with open war. Sansa watched the justs from a vantage, face drawn with worry when any knights crashed. Arya stood near the stables, cheering the horses more than the riders. Ned felt a pang. He wished they could see King's Landing at its best, not overshadowed by fear and famine. But perhaps this was their new reality, the price for the realm's fragile peace. When the tournament ended, a knight from the Crownlands emerged the victor. He was not a famed warrior, but his skill in the tilt was real. Stannis awarded him a small purse and a formal blessing, though the king's words were curt and to the point. Later, as evening fell, a subdued feast in the Red Keep's hall offered hot food to a handful of guests, lords and knights who had braved the roads. The chatter centered on future prospects for the monarchy, speculation about the Tyrells, the Lannisters, or whether Renly might remain in quiet exile. Some whispered about Daenerys Targaryen again, for the rumor of dragon eggs had resurfaced. Ned mostly listened, wishing that the realm's energy could be turned northward, to the real threat. But men's hearts did not easily shift from their old fixations. In the swirl of conversation, Kevan Lannister approached Ned. "Lord Stark, I see your face is as solemn as the king's. Perhaps we can lighten the mood. Come, share a cup of wine with me. I promise not to talk about gold for a moment." Ned hesitated, then nodded politely. They stood near a table laden with roast meats. Kevan poured 2 cups of a robust red from the arbor. "I remember older times, when Lord Tywin was hand to King Aerys. The hall was full of glitter and splendor. Now we have these cold shadows. Do you not think the realm lacks life?" Ned sipped the wine. "Better a realm lacking life's frivolities than drowning in war. We had enough of that." Kevan inclined his head. "Fair enough. I only hope we can eventually see a balance. Order without joy is brittle. But I admire your diligence, Lord Stark. Perhaps one day we'll see spring, and with it, a renewal." Ned allowed a faint smile. Perhaps. He thought of how precarious it all was. But at least the lines of conflict had receded. If men like Kevan, more moderate than Tywin, could see reason, the worst might be avoided. The feast wound down early. Stannis departed with a terse goodnight, and the hall mostly emptied. Ned lingered to speak with Davos about the distribution of leftover food to the poorest wards. Then he retired, stepping into the cold corridors that led to his family's rooms. That night, he found Sansa reading by a small brazier. Arya was already asleep, her wooden sword under the bed, no doubt. "How were the justs, Sansa?" he asked, pulling off his cloak. She folded her book. "It was nice to see some color in the city. The knights wore ribbons. It reminded me of stories from old times. But it still felt sad, father. No music, no laughter." Ned sighed. "Times are hard, my sweet. We do what we can." She nodded, eyes shining with an understanding beyond her years. "I know. I hope we can go home someday, to see Robb and the others." "I hope so too," Ned murmured, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. One day, if the realm truly steadied, maybe he could relinquish the burden. But for now, that burden lay fully on him and Stannis. He told her to sleep well, then left the room, exhaustion tugging at him like a heavy cloak. At dawn, a new rumor circulated. Jorah Mormont, the exiled knight who had once served at court, might have been spotted in Lys, allegedly in the company of Daenerys Targaryen. Another snippet of gossip from the other side of the sea. Ned found it troubling. Yora had once sworn fealty to the Starks, then fled after selling poachers into slavery. If he truly served Daenerys, it might mean she was gathering information about Westeros. But it was ephemeral hearsay. Stannis had no inclination to mount an overseas expedition, not with the realm's current limitations. So they let the rumor lie for now. Winter ground on. The roads grew icier, yet the realm did not collapse. Slowly, uncertainly, it found a rhythm under King Stannis and his hand, Eddard Stark. The Tyrells kept to Highgarden, abiding by their surrender. Renly nursed his regrets in a quiet estate, apparently content to avoid further bloodshed. The Lannisters maintained a presence, prodding for advantage but settling for partial victories. The Tullus promised to chase bandits, as demanded, though success came slowly. Letters from the north indicated the Night's Watch had gained enough new recruits to man some abandoned forts, though the rumored whites or others remained unconfirmed. And so the realm held, not by zeal or love, but by shared exhaustion and the heavy memory of too many wars. In that delicate balance, Ned Stark took what solace he could from the daily tasks that upheld the peace. Signing writs for food distribution, conferring with masters of coin, ensuring men patrolled the roads, supporting the Night's Watch. Honor, he reflected, was not always glorious. Often, it was the slow, patient work of preventing 1,000 small disasters. Robert's rebellion had once pinned Ned's name to grand battles. Now, history might remember him as the man who fended off chaos by devoting himself to the realm's unrelenting practical needs. Each evening, he looked to the horizon beyond the walls, scanning the sky. The crows flew in circles, and sometimes he imagined them as omens. Yet the city's towers stood fast. The roads, though dangerous, were passable. The 7 kingdoms were battered, but for now, they remained one kingdom, with a single king who strove, however coldly, to keep it from fracturing. Ned had kept his vow to Robert to protect the monarchy, at least thus far. And if, in a season or a year, a fresh storm erupted, be it a Targaryen crossing the sea, Balon Greyjoy rising again, or the White Walkers descending from the far north, well, Eddard Stark would face that storm as he always had, with steady courage, unwavering duty, and the hope that honest men's efforts might yet save the realm from destruction. Winter was here, but so was resolve. And in that resolve, perhaps, lay the seeds of a future that might truly be free of the endless cycle of war and betrayal. He could not know how the story would end, whether Stannis' line would flourish, whether Daenerys Targaryen's rumored dragons would remain myth or become a fiery reality, whether the others would remain in the shadows or emerge under the cold moon. All he could do was stand as Hand of the King, guiding decisions that shaped the kingdom's fate, a kingdom that, for now, walked the knife's edge between peace and chaos. It was more than many realms ever had. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, he remembered Robert's laugh, the easy grin of the friend he had once followed into battle. That man was gone, replaced by the memory of a king who had named Ned Protector of the Realm, inadvertently granting him the power to hold the realm together from the start. Ned had done so, forging alliances, quelling disputes, sidestepping the Lannisters where possible, forging uneasy truces with the Tyrells, and supporting Stannis' lawful claim. And this was the fruit of it. A realm that endured winter intact, bruised but standing. In the darkness of his chamber, Ned whispered a quiet prayer to the old gods that all these fragile accords might hold, that the people of Westeros could endure winter without mass starvation, that no new uprising would tear them apart anew. Duty had led him here, to this new era shaped by a single fateful choice at the start of Robert's reign. Time alone would reveal whether the final harvest of that choice would be unity or catastrophe. Until that verdict was rendered by the turning of the seasons, he would do as he always had, guard the realm with every breath, every pen stroke on every document, every measured compromise. That was the legacy of Eddard Stark, the Quiet Wolf. And though the future remained unwritten, one truth stood certain. He would not forsake his watch, not while honor and duty still meant something in a land so prone to forgetting the lessons of the past.